At 75, when I had a stroke, I thought that was it. Eleanor had been gone for 5 years, taking all the life from our house on Maple Street with her. The kids had their own lives now. Vera was on the other side of Dayton, Lucille all the way. In Colorado. Then, one dreary morning, half my body refused to cooperate. The doctor said I was lucky, no brain damage, no issues with speech. But my left arm moved as though it belonged to someone else, and my leg wobbled as I walked. Vera offered to let me stay with them until I got back on my feet. That was 3 years ago. Temporary, he said. But what does temporary really mean? Melody, his wife, wasn't exactly thrilled about the idea of living with a disabled father-in-law, though she managed to keep her smile when their son was around. "You'll be comfortable in our guest wing," she chirped, showing me to a room on the first floor. "No stairs, private bath perfect for your condition." The way she said condition, like I was some unpleasant object that had to be tolerated in her pristine home, left a bitter taste in my mouth. Melody is 38, tall and sharp, with red hair and a pointed chin. Her smile never reaches her eyes, and her ambitions are as big as the mountain she thinks she can climb. A realtor, she's built their fancy house in Dayton into a personal advertisement. Meanwhile, I Pierce Farnan, former water inspector with a creaky step and a wrinkled face, feel like a blemish on her perfect picture. "Good morning, Melody," I say every time I see her in the kitchen, mixing her fancy vegan milk into a smoothie. "Ah, Mr. Farnan," she always responds, as though I'm some sort of inconvenience. "How did you sleep?" Never Pierce, never Dad. Not after 3 years. I lie, telling her I slept fine, though we both know that the mattress she chose for me is so cheap the springs poke into my back every night. She doesn't notice. Of course, she's too busy scrolling through messages from clients. I might as well be invisible. Vera is usually gone by the time I wake up. He works for a computer security company and leaves early. He's 42, tall, and has my gray eyes, though he has his mother's easygoing personality, soft and accommodating. Sometimes I think Melody chose him for his malleability. "Old people need more warmth," she said one day when Vera was home. "I've increased the temperature in your room, Mr. Farnan." "How thoughtful," I replied, making eye contact. Vera smiled, pleased that I'd acknowledged her gesture. He had no idea that a week earlier I'd asked her to lower the temperature, because the heat was giving me a headache. She nodded but forgot. After they left, I adjusted the thermostat from my phone. Yes, my phone. Melody thinks I can barely send a text. She doesn't know that I've spent the last 2.5 years learning all the tech I can get my hands on. When you lose mobility, you cherish any scrap of control, and that phone has become my lifeline. Through it, I read the news, watch documentaries, and chat online with other former utility workers. One day, Melody caught me typing and asked, "Are you writing something, Mr. Farnan?" She snuck up on me like a cat. "Checking the weather," I said quickly, closing the app where I had been reading an article on smart homes. "It's important to know if it's going to rain on your joints, you know." She gave a polite smile, the kind that didn't reach her eyes. "If you need help with your phone, feel free to ask. These new technologies are so complicated for your generation." "I'm getting by," I muttered. "An old dog can learn new tricks too." She laughed like I had told the funniest joke and walked away, her hips swaying in that tight skirt. One day, I overheard her on the phone with a friend. Can you imagine? He just sits there all day, staring out the window, mumbling to himself. Completely useless. Vera says he used to be so active building things, gardening. Now all he does is eat, sleep, and complain about his health. I stood outside her door, clutching my cane tightly. I wasn't mumbling. I was doing a crossword puzzle in my mind. I hadn't complained about my health in weeks, But to her, I was just the old man who couldn't be bothered to live. It's amazing how quickly someone can become invisible in their own family. I've lived nearly 8 decades, built a house with my hands, raised 2 kids, ensured clean water for the town for 35 years, and now I'm just an inconvenient piece of furniture that can't be discarded. Melody makes a show of her care. In front of Vera, she put an extra pillow under me, ask if I'm cold, offer me seconds at dinner. But the moment he's out of the room, her face freezes. She becomes a mannequin, repeating phrases like, "Mr. Farnan, would you mind not leaving? Your pills on the kitchen table?" Or, "Mr. Farnan, did you mix up the remotes again?" Now the TV in the living room doesn't work. Little daily jabs, reminders that I'm a burden. I've learned to fight back in small ways. "Sorry, Melody," I say. "My old eyes didn't notice. The milk was out." Just like your young ones didn't notice the grocery list I left on the fridge 3 days ago. She tightens her lips. Her eyes flash with anger, but she never calls me out. It would be too undignified. Instead, she takes revenge. Her way for getting my phone calls, rearranging my things so I can't find them, planning family events in places I can't access. She invite guests over without telling me. I'll come out in my bathrobe and slippers, and suddenly there are strangers in my living room. "Oh, Mr. Farnan," she say, as if I didn't already know. "I knocked on your door, but I guess you didn't hear me. We have important guests today." A lie. She never knocked. Vera, though, doesn't see any of this. He comes home late, tired, his eyes red from staring at screens all day. He gives me a hug, asks how my day was, but I can tell he's somewhere else. I stopped telling him about Melody's little cruelties after I tried once, and he frowned and said, "Dad, Melody's doing her best to make you comfortable. You should be more grateful." That's when I realized the son always sides with the wife. That's how it goes, but I found some small joys. Every morning, when the weather's nice, I sit outside under the old oak tree in the garden. Melody hates that bench. It spoils the landscaping, she says. But Vera insisted I have a place to relax in the fresh air. I sit there, watch the birds, observe the neighbors, and jot down notes on my phone. Yes, I keep a diary. Old inspector's habit. I used to record the pH levels of the town's reservoirs. Now I note down Melody's comings and goings, the names of her visitors, fragments of phone conversations. Sometimes, when the house is empty, I secretly connect to the smart home system that Vera set up. He gave me the basics: thermostats, locks, cameras. But with a little help from YouTube, I've learned to bypass the limitations he set. I can track when Melody comes home during the day when she's supposed to be at work. I can hear her bad-mouthing Vera on the phone, calling him a nerd, a workaholic. I notice her trying on new clothes she can't afford, all while claiming to Vera that money's tight. I keep these observations to myself. I don't know what I'm waiting for. Maybe the right moment to open Vera's eyes. Or maybe I'm just biding my time, preparing for the day Melody subtly pushes me out the door and into a nursing home. She leaves brochures for them around the house, pointing to glossy photos of elderly people in wheelchairs and talking about the beautiful gardens and round-the-clock care. I can't help but wonder how long I'll be here before I finally become someone else's problem. It wonderful? I'd rather die in my own bed, I reply, looking her straight in the eye. No one's talking about dying, she laughs, but her eyes remain cold. It would just be more comfortable for everyone, especially for you. For everyone means for me, and we both know it. My phone has become not just a window to the world, but a shield. While I have that connection, I'm not completely at her mercy. I can order food when she forgets to put me on the shopping list. I can call a cab if I need to go to the doctor and she's too busy to take me. I can contact the outside world if something happens. Sometimes I look at pictures of our old house on Maple Street. Vera sold it after my stroke to pay the medical bills. I don't blame him. It was a practical decision. But a part of meted with the loss of that house where every crack in the wall, every cracky floorboard had a story. Now I live in Melody's perfect sterile house, where everything is picked out from interior design catalogs, but there isn't an ounce of soul. My room is the only place I can be myself, though Melody invades it under the pretense of cleaning, rearranging. My things as she sees fit. It's much more comfortable this way. Mr. Farnan, she says, moving my books to the top shelf where I can't reach without a stepladder, and it looks neater. The small battles, the daily humiliations, the slow erasure of my identity, It's much more comfortable this way, Mr. Farnan, she says, moving my books to the top shelf where I can't reach without a stepladder, and it looks neater. The small battles, the daily humiliations, the slow erasure of my identity, my independence, my dignity, but I'm hanging in there. 78 years of life have taught me one thing: patience. I can wait. And who knows, maybe one day patience will rid me with the opportunity to show Melody that this old man isn't completely useless yet. I woke up early as usual. 78 years old today is a number that makes me dizzy. Eleanor hadn't even lived to 70. I ran my hand over my wrinkled cheek as if checking to see if I was still here in this shabby room in someone else's house with someone else's life around me. Outside the window, Dayton was waking up. The sun had colored the tops of the trees gold, and somewhere in the distance could be heard the murmur of a mower. Mr. Taylor across street always started cutting the lawn at first light, like he was afraid the grass would run away. I would laugh at the thought if today were a normal morning. But today is April 16th, my birthday, a day that had always been celebrated modestly but with dignity. Eleanor baked my favorite pecan pie. The children gave me handmade cards. Later, when they grew up, these cards were replaced by ties and books, which I never wore or read, but I appreciated the very fact of attention. I rose slowly from the bed, pulled on my robe, and fumbled for my slippers with my feet. My cane stood by the bedside table, a faithful companion after a stroke. The phone was habitually on the charger. I checked the time, 6:30. The house was still asleep. I could enjoy the silence before Melody filled the space with her presence. In the kitchen, I poured myself a cup of coffee. The one treat I allowed myself every morning, despite the doctor's objections. To hell with their inhibitions. At 78, a man deserves at least a decent cup of coffee. I sat at the kitchen table, looking at my hands, the knotted fingers, the protruding veins, the brown spots of age. Those hands had built dams, fixed pipes, held babies, stroked Eleanor's hair. Now they could hardly hold a cup without shaking. "Oh, you're up already." Melody's voice broke into me musings. She stood in the kitchen doorway in her ivory silk robe, her red hair perfectly styled. Even at 6 o'clock in the morning, she looked like she was ready for a magazine photo shoot. "Good morning, Melody," I said. "You're early today." She walked to the coffee machine without looking at me. "Did you sleep badly?" "It was fine." I paused. "Today's a special day." She frowned, going over possible events in her mind. "April 16th, she mumbled. "Ah, your birthday, right?" No enthusiasm, no warm wishes, just a statement of fact, as if I'd reminded her of a dental appointment. 78, I said, though no one asked me. "Congratulations." She faked a smile. "You look vivacious for your age." A fake compliment followed immediately. By the way, I wanted to warn you. We're having some important guests tonight. Clients who are interested in the Riverside mansion. Very wealthy people. I've been preparing this meeting for weeks. I slowly set Theckup down on the table tonight. Yes, 7 o'clock tonight. The caterer will arrive at 5 to set up, she said in a businesslike tone, looking at her phone. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable spending the evening in your room. I can bring you dinner there. It's my birthday today, Melody, I said quietly. She looked away from the phone for a second. I know. I'm sorry it's such a coincidence, but this meeting can't be rescheduled. Why don't we celebrate this weekend? I'm sure Warner wouldn't mind. I was planning on inviting a few friends. I lied. I don't have any friends left in Dayton. Everyone's either dead, moved closer to their kids, or in nursing homes. But I wanted to. See her reaction. Melody froze. Friends, you never mentioned birthday plans. I've already organized, invitations sent out, catering booked. Even the florist is coming in the morning. We can't cancel. I've lived in this house for 3 years, I said, feeling anger rising in me. Was it really that hard to ask me about my plans for my own birthday? She pressed her lips together. Mr. Farnan, I'm very sorry for the coincidence, but business is business. These clients can bring in commissions that will cover your keep for a whole year. There it is, your allowance. Like I was some stray animal. They were sheltering out of mercy. I get a pension, I reminded her, and Social Security benefits. I put that money into the general budget. Of course, she smiled, her fake smile, and we appreciate it, but let's be realistic. Your contribution barely covers the cost of your medications. I was about to reply something harsh, but at that moment, my phone rang. Vera. Hi. His voice sounded cheerful. Happy birthday, 78. Wow. How are you feeling? Fine, I said, glancing at Melody, who had defiantly left the kitchen. Thanks, son. I'm sorry I can't be with you this morning. I'm swamped at work and there's a security emergency with a client, but we'll definitely celebrate this weekend. Okay. I ordered you a gift. Should be here today. Thank you, I said again. Did you know you're having guests over tonight? Yeah. Melody told me. Some important clients. I'm sorry it's such a coincidence. She worked really hard to get that contract. Of course, I sighed. Work comes first. You realize how important this is to her. For us, has sounded a little worried. We're living in a difficult time. Prices are rising. Mortgages are, I understand. I interrupted him. I didn't want to listen to another lecture about the family budget. Good luck at work. Thanks, Dad. I'll see you tonight and happy birthday again. He disconnected and I was left sitting there with my phone in my hand. Even on my birthday, the conversation turned to Melody's work. She always came first. Her career, her ambitions, her plans. I slowly got up and went to my room. I needed to get dressed and somehow face the day with dignity. As I passed the living room, I heard Melody's voice. She was on the phone, apparently with her eternal friend Jennifer, and has the nerve to resent me. It's like I made an appointment to meet him on his birthday. Like I have to remember those dates and organize my work around his schedule. I stopped around the corner listening. No, you have no idea how exhausting it is, Melody continued. That old man is ruining our whole life. Vera's too soft to send him to a nursing home, and I have to put up with his constant grousing, his smell of old age in the house, his constant presence. I can't invite my girlfriends over for a glass of wine without him crawling out of his room with questions and complaints. I clenched my cane so hard my knuckles turned white. You know, sometimes I think, no, it's awful. She lowered her voice. Sometimes I think how much easier it would have been if that stroke had been more serious. I felt the blood rush from my face. My sister-in-law had just wished me dead, or at least a more severe disability. Okay, I've got to run. The florist will be here any minute. Yes, of course they are invited. 7 o'clock. There'll be champagne and oysters. Very high dash and dot these clients are worth it. She ended the conversation, and I slipped into my room as quickly as my limp would allow. My heart was pounding like crazy. In the mirror above the dresser, I saw my face pale with red blotches on my cheeks. So this is what she really thinks. That's what's behind her. Fake smiles and feigned concern. She wishes I wasn't alive. I sat down on the bed trying to calm my breathing. Something had to be done. This couldn't go on like this. Maybe I should have called Lucille. We hadn't spoken in almost 2 years, but maybe now would be a good time to reconnect. I pulled out my phone, found her number, but my finger hovered over the call button. What do I say? Hey, daughter. Your sister-in-law just wished me dead. Take me away from here. It sounded pathetic even in my head. I spent the entire day in my room, only going out to the bathroom and the kitchen for tea. Melody was busy getting ready for the evening. I could hear her commanding the florists, the waiters, the cleaners. The house was filled with smells of food, flowers, and furniture polish. At 5 o'clock in the evening, when the hustle and bustle had reached its climax, I decided to go out. I showered, put on my best suit, dark blue, slightly worn at the elbows, but still presentable. After all, it was my birthday, and I had a right to look dignified. When I walked out into the living room, Melody was just instructing a young waiter on how to arrange the glasses. When she saw me, she froze for a moment. Mr. Farnan, she began with a strained smile. Are you going somewhere? No, I answered calmly. I live here, remember? Of course, but she glanced nervously at the catering staff. I thought we agreed that you would spend the evening in your room. The guests will arrive in 2 hours. I don't remember such an agreement. I made my way to the couch and sat down, watching her face begin to ream with anger. This is my house as much as it is ours. Technically, it's Vera's house, she hissed, stepping closer. And there's a very important business meeting here today. Please don't make this any harder than it has to be. I'm not going to interfere with your business plans, I said, but I have a right to celebrate my birthday. I've invited a couple offerings. They'll be here at 6. It was a pure lie. I didn't have any friends who could come, but I wanted to see her reaction, and she didn't disappoint. What? Her voice trailed off into a squeal, and several employees turned it around. She noticed this and switched to a furious whisper. You can't just invite some people into my house unannounced. There are going to be some very important clients here. $1 million deal is at stake. Then maybe you should have considered my plans in advance, I asked, surprised at my own audacity. Or at least asked me before occupying Fuhole House on my birthday. Her face contorted with rage, but she quickly pulled herself together, glancing back at the workers. We'll talk about this elsewhere. She turned abruptly and walked towards the kitchen. I rose slowly and followed her, leaning on my cane. In the kitchen, Melody turned. Tome, crossing her arms over her chest. Listen, Mr. Farnan, I understand you're upset about your birthday, but we can celebrate tomorrow or this weekend. Tonight is critical to my career. I can't have any of your retired friends spoiling it with their talk of ailments and memories of the 50s. My friends didn't exist, I said, looking her straight in the eye. I lied to see your reaction, and I did. She blinked, clearly not expecting it. Then why all the drama to get on my nerves? To remind me that I'm a human being too, Melody, a man who deserves to be honored on his birthday. She sighed suddenly, almost senile. Look, I didn't mean to offend you. It's just that today is a really important day for me. My reputation at the agency depends on these clients. Maybe we can find a compromise. You could stay at the party for a while and then go back to your place. I considered her offer. It was a step forward, albeit a forced one. Okay, I agreed. I'll behave myself. I won't talk about my ailments in my 50s. She smiled slightly, perhaps sincerely for the first time all day. Thank you. I appreciate that. Happy birthday, Mr. Farn. We were standing in awkward silence when suddenly the doorbell rang. It must be the decorator with the balloons. Melody hurried to the door. I stayed in the kitchen feeling strangely satisfied with our conversation. Maybe for the first time in 3 years, we actually talked like human beings, but my joy was short-lived. Melody returned a couple minutes later holding a box. "This is for you," she said, holding out the package from Vera, I believe. I took the box. It was heavier than I'd expected. Something electronic, apparently. "By the way," Melody said casually, "I forgot to show you something in the basement. Remember when you said you wanted to find your old photo albums? I think I saw them down there." "In any of the boxes. In the basement?" I frowned. "But my albums are in the closet in my room." No. I mean those old ones with the black and white photos. You mentioned them a couple months ago. They're in the boxes we moved from your old house." I vaguely recalled the conversation about the photos, but I was sure all my albums had long since been disassembled and stored in my room. "Come in, I'll show you." Melody was already heading for the door that led to the basement. "It'll only take a minute." Something in her voice sounded strange to me, but curiosity overcame it. I really treasured the old photos. There were pictures of my parents, of a young Eleanor, of the kids as babies. We went down the stairs to the basement. It was cool and dry, a modern room with concrete walls, good lighting, and shelving along the walls. No damp or spiders like in the basement of old houses. "Where are they?" Melody started looking at the boxes on the far shelving unit. "I think it's around here somewhere." I stood at the foot of the stairs, leaning on my cane and holding a box with a gift from my son in the other hand. Suddenly, Melody shrieked and dashed for the exit. "What's wrong?" I asked, but she had already run past me and up the stairs. I turned around and saw the basement door slam shut, and then I heard the sound of a key turning. "Melody," I waddled toward the stairs. "What's going on?" "Stay put," came from behind the door. "The door's jammed." "I'll call a repairman after the party." "What?" I couldn't believe my ears. "Melody, open up right now." "I'm sorry, Mr. Farn, but he can't risk my career on your whims. I promise I'll let you out as soon as the guests leave. There's a sofa and a toilet, so you'll be perfectly comfortable. You can't lock me in here." I banged on the door with my cane. "It's illegal. Think of it as a birthday present." A few hours of peace and quiet. Her voice sounded distant. "Don't worry. Vera will be late at work and I'll tell him you've decided to rest in your room. I'll see you at midnight." I heard her receding footsteps and then there was silence. I was locked in the basement on my 78th birthday. I stood leaning on my cane and stared at the closed door. I couldn't believe it had really happened that former water inspector, a man with 40 years of public service, a father of 2, had been locked in the basement like a naughty child. First came the anger. Fierce, all-consuming anger. I hit the door with my cane. "Melody, open the damn door right now." I shouted, realizing she was already gone. I pounded on the door again and again until my knuckles were bloody. Then I tried to kick the lock with my cane, but only bent it. Damn it. Without the cane, I'd have an even harder time getting around. I sank heavily onto the step, trying to stop trembling in my hands. I needed to calm down and think. This whole situation was so absurd that it bordered on criminal. Holding a man against his will isn't that illegal. My thoughts were racing. Frantically. Should I yell, knock on the walls? But who would hear? The basement was well insulated, few walls concrete. Gradually, the rage gave way to a cold realization. Melody did this on purpose. Meticulous planning lured me in here, knowing I couldn't get out on my own, and she wasn't going to let me out until the party was over. I took a deep breath, trying to deal with the humiliation. 78 years and I was locked up like a naughty puppy. Deep inside, fear stirred. What if she didn't come at all? What if she decided to leave me here overnight or longer? No, those thoughts weren't leading anywhere. Melody's but not stupid enough to commit a real crime. She just wanted to get me out of the way for the duration of an important meeting. I slowly made my way down to the end-off stairs and looked around. The basement was set up like a small workshop and storage room at the Storytime, a workbench along one wall, racks of tools and boxes along the other. There was an old couch in the corner. Apparently the comfort Melody had mentioned. Next to it was a door to Asmal bathroom, a former utility room that Vera had remodeled last summer. I put the box with my son's gift on the workbench and sat on the couch trying to collect my thoughts. There were muffled sounds coming from upstairs. Apparently, guests were starting to arrive. Music, laughter, glasses clinking. My birthday party was going on without me. I reached for my pocket, my phone still in my pocket. Of course, Melody hadn't thought about the fact that I could call for help. In her mind, I was a helpless old man who could barely dial a number. My first impulse was to call Vera, but then came doubt. What would I say? Your wife locked me in the basement? Would he believe me? Or would he take her side again, thinking I was exaggerating? Dad, you must have misunderstood. Melody was just concerned for your safety. I could literally hear his voice in my head. Plus, he said he was busy with an important project. And knowing my son, that meant his phone was lying somewhere off to the side while he was immersed in his work. One could have called emergency services. But the thought of the fire department breaking down the basement door and then finding out it was a family dispute. No, I didn't want that kind of humiliation, and I didn't want trouble for Verner no matter what. He is my son after all. I looked at the phone. What else could I do? And then it hit me. A home security app. Werner had installed a smart home system about a year ago. Cameras, motion sensors, remote control of locks and lights. He'd given me basic access, figuring that at me age, complicated technology would only confuse me. But he didn't realize how much time I'd spent learning the system. I opened the app and logged in with my account. Basic access allowed me to see camera images in common areas, the hallway, the living room, the backyard. But I discovered long ago that I could gain more control if I exploited it in vulnerabilities in the system. Months of covert experimentation hadn't gone to waste. I activated the camera in the living room. The party was in full swing. 20 elegantly dressed people with glasses of champagne, quiet jazz music, waiters with trays. Melody was the center of attention in a tight-fitting dark green dress. Her hair high, her smile radiant, the perfect hostess off house. Hypocritical cunt, I muttered, zooming in. She was talking to a tall man in an expensive suit. Judging by her body language, the tilt of her head, the touching of her hair, she was definitely flirting. But that could have just been part of her job as a realtor. Charming clients was her specialty. I switched to the camera in the dining room. That's where the waiters were setting up appetizers, then to the camera in the hallway. A few more guests had just arrived. Turning back to the living room, I noticed that Melody and the tall man had disappeared. I quickly looked through the other cameras but didn't see them. That was odd. Where could they have gone? I remembered that Vera had installed a camera on the back porch to keep track of packages. Switching to it, I saw Melody and the man. They were standing close together talking in a low voice. I turned on the sound. You can't go in here, Melody, the man said. It's too risky. We're going to be at work late at night, she replied, and the old man is locked in the basement. No one will know. I tensed up. What are they talking about? You've got a house full of guests anyway. The man shook his head. We can't just disappear. Then let's meet later. She put her hand on his chest. At our usual place around 11 o'clock. What about your husband? I told you he's at work. Melody sighed impatiently. Project of the century or something. He wouldn't even notice I'm gone. What if he does? I'll tell him I was dropping off the last of the guests. She shrugged. He always believes what I say. Sometimes it's even boring. The man laughed and leaned toward her. They kissed, not fleetingly, but deeply, passionately. God, Stoyert, I've missed you so much, Melody whispered. This week without you had been an eternity. I've missed you too, he replied. But we have to be more careful. Vera's starting to suspect something. Vera? She snorted. He's so immersed in his computers that he wouldn't notice cheating even if I brought you into our bedroom. Still, we'll need to be careful. If he finds out, the deal's off. He won't. Melody fixed her hair. We're almost there. In a month, the house will be sold. We'll get the commission, and then we'll be out of hiding. What about him? Stewart asked. Vera, she shrugged. He'll get over it. Men always get over it. I meant the old man, your father-in-law. Oh, that one. She waved her hand. We'll put him in a nursing home as soon as the deal's done. I've already picked out a place. Inexpensive. Will Vera go for it? You bet he will, Melody grinned. Especially when I show him his father's medical bills. He has no idea how much all those drugs and procedures really cost. I sat there numb with shock. My daughter-in-law wasn't just cheating on my son. She was planning to dump him after taking a large commission from some deal. And she was going to send me to a cheap nursing home. I automatically hit the record button. The app saved the video and audio to cloud storage. Now I had proof. We should get back, Melody said, glancing at her watch. The clients are waiting. Not until after one more kiss. Stewart pulled her to him. I turned off the camera. I'd had enough. Melody wasn't just an unpleasant woman. She was a snake. And my son was too blind to see it. What do I do with this information? Tell Viner. He might not believe it. Or worse, he might believe it but decide to forgive her. I knew my son. He was a romantic at heart, always believing in the best in people. Even if I showed him the tape, he might find justification for her actions. I continued to switch between cameras, watching the party. Melody and Stewart had returned to the living room, now keeping their distance from each other, interacting professionally with the guests. No one would have suspected that a moment Agatha had been kissing passionately on the back porch. As I continued to watch, I noticed a few more interesting details. Melody had whispered something in the ear of a woman who looked like Jennifer, and she grinned as she looked at Stewart. So her friend knew about the affair. Stewart, meanwhile, was discussing something with an older man, often mentioning property and tax breaks. I found another interesting feature on the app, remote access to Vera's computer. He had set it up to work remotely and never changed passwords. I hesitated. It was an invasion of his personal space, but wasn't it more important to find out the truth? I connected to his work computer and started looking through recent files. In the real estate folder, I found documents relating to some mansion on Riverside Drive. Apparently, it was the same deal Melody was talking about, a house worth $4 million, with a commission of about $120,000. No wonder she was so anxious to get this deal done. But there was something else. In the correspondence between Melody and the agency, I found mention of additional services that were to be paid for separately. What could that mean? I wasn't sure, but it sounded suspicious. I went back to watching the party. Time was passing, and I was still sitting in the basement trying to decide what to do next. Should I call the police? But what would I say? My daughter-in-law. Lockett in the basement and is cheating on my son. They might think it's just a domestic dispute. And then it hit me. Lucille, my daughter, could help. We hadn't spoken in almost 2 years, but not because of some big fight, but because of a misunderstanding. After Thanksgiving, she stopped returning my calls. I thought she took offense to something I said. But what if it was Melody's job? What if she'd somehow turned Lucille against me like she'd tried to turn Werner against me? I found Lucille's number on my phone and, taking a deep breath, pressed call. After a few beeps, I heard her voice, Papa. She sounded surprised but not hostile. Lucille. My voice trembled. How are you? I'm fine. She was quiet. This is unexpected. You never call on weekdays. Today is a special day, I said. My birthday? Oh my God. She had gasped. I'd completely forgotten. I'm sorry, Daddy. Happy birthday. Thank you. I tried to pull myself together. Lucille, I need your help. I'm in a difficult situation. What's wrong? She sounded worried. Melody locked me in the basement, I said bluntly, so I wouldn't interfere with her important party. There was a long pause. What? Lucille finally said, Are you serious? Absolutely, I sighed. I know it sounds crazy, but it's true. She lured me here under the pretense of showing me some old photos and then shell-locked the door. Said she'd let me out after the guests left. It's just outrageous. Lucille's voice shook with anger. I'm calling Vera right now. No, don't. I said quickly. He's at work busy with an important project. I'm not sure he'll believe me over her. Then I'm calling the police, and that's not the best option. I shook my head, though Shekel didn't see it. They might think it's just a family dispute. Lucille, I think you could come over and help me out. Come over? She sounded surprised. To Dayton right now. Yeah, if you can. I knew it was a lot to ask. I realized we haven't talked in a while, and it's a strange request. I thought you didn't want to see me, she interrupted after Thanksgiving. You stopped returning my texts. I froze. What? You're the one who stopped returning my calls. No, Dad. She sounded confused. I texted you several times, but you didn't answer. And when I called Melody, sighed, you were busy or asleep. It all makes sense now. Melody, of course, it was her intercepting my messages, not returning my calls, intentionally destroying my relationship with my daughter. Lucille, I never got your messages, I said quietly. I didn't know about your calls. I think Melody intervened. That Lucille didn't finish her sentence, but I could hear her breathing heavily. I'll be there in an hour. Hang in there, Dad. Thank you, I whispered, tears welling up in my eyes. We agreed that she would call Mel when she got there. I explained to her how to find the key to the basement. It was usually hanging on a hook in Feppentry next to the kitchen. I spent the next hour continuing to watch the party through the cameras. Melody shined, going from one guest to the next, smiling and laughing. No one had any idea that the homeowner was sitting locked in the basement and the hostess was planning to elope with her lover. Stuart was also in the center of attention. He was telling something, gesticulating vigorously, and the guests were listening attentively. Apparently, he was an important figure in the deal. When the phone vibrated, I flinched. A message from Lucille. I'm in position, heading to the back entrance. Like you said. I switched to the backyard camera and saw her, my daughter, whom I hadn't seen in 2 years. She looked beautiful, slender, with a confident gait, wearing an elegant coat. Her brown hair, the same as Eleanor's, was gathered into a simple ponytail. She stepped carefully up onto the porch and slipped through the back door, which I had remotely unlocked through the app. A few minutes later, I heard footsteps on the basement stairs and then the sound of a key turning. The door opened and there stood Lucille, my daughter, my savior. Daddy, she rushed over to me, wrapping her arms around me. I missed you so much. Me too, honey. I hugged her back, feeling tears roll down my cheeks. Me too. We stood like that for a few seconds, and then she pulled away, looking me over with concern. Are you okay? She didn't hurt you. No, just locked me in. I shook my head. But Lucille, there's something you need to know. Something Werner needs to know. I showed her the videotape of Melody and Stuart talking on the back porch. Her eyes widened as she watched it, and her face palled with anger. That she gasped with indignation. How could she? Poor Werner. He must find out, I said, but I'm not. Sure, he'll believe me. He will when he sees this. Lucille nodded resolutely at the phone. Come on, Dad. It's time to put an end to all this. We walked up the stairs, Lucille supporting me as my cane was bent from to kick the door open. We stopped in the hallway, hearing voices and music from the living room. Ready? Lucille asked, squeezing my hand. More than ready, I replied, clutching the recording phone in my other hand. We walked into the living room and all heads turned toward us. Melody was standing in the center of the room with a glass of champagne, making some sort of toast. When she saw us, she froze and the glass slipped out of her hand, shattering on the floor. Mr. Farnan, she said in a low voice. Lucille. Her face palled as she saw the phone in my hand and realized I knew everything. There was absolute silence in the living room. Even the music seemed to have subsided, submitting to everyone's stupor. Melody stood in the center of the room, the glass shards glittering at her feet. Her face took on the hue of a freshly whitewashed wall. Lucille, she repeated, shifting her gaze from me to her daughter. What a surprise. We weren't expecting you. Obviously, Lucille replied coldly. Stuart, the tall man in the expensive suit, took a step forward, but stopped when he saw me pick up the phone. His eyes flashed with understanding and something else. Fear. The guest began to whisper, sensing the tension in the air. Melody quickly pulled herself together, putting a professional smile on her face. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the slight misunderstanding. This is my father-in-law, Mr. Pierce Farnan, and his daughter Lucille. They have decided to join us for the evening. She turned to the waiter. Please remove the shards and bring me a new glass. Then, without losing her smile, she approached us. What are you doing? She hissed through her teeth. I explained that today was an important meeting. Yes, you did. I nodded. Right before you locked me in the basement. A few of the guests standing nearby had obviously heard what I'd said. Their expressions changed from mild embarrassment to outright curiosity. Don't be silly, Melody lied nervously. You went down there looking for some old photographs. The door must have slammed shut because off the draft. And locked? Lucille asked, raising an eyebrow. The draft? I don't know how it happened. Melody stood her ground. Maybe the lock malfunctioned. Anyway, it's not a topic of discussion right now. We have company. It's my birthday, I reminded her, which you had so studiously ignored. Melody pressed her lips together, her eyes flashing with lightning. Mr. Farnan, I suggest you go back to your room. We'll discuss this later. No, Lucille intervened. No more later. I've already called Werner. He's on his way home. That statement threw Melody off balance. The color drained from her face. Why did you do that? She whispered. He's busy with an important project. I think this is more important. Lucille nodded at my phone. More important. Melody shifted her gaze to the device in my hand, and I could see the realization slowly dawning on her face. What is it? She tried to speak casually, but her voice trembled. Really? I answered simply. Stuart, who'd been watching our conversation from a distance, suddenly started to leave. He whispered something to the older man beside him, shook his hand, and headed for the exit. But Lucille blocked his path. Are you leaving already? She asked with feigned politeness. What about your meeting with Melody at 11 at your usual place? Stuart froze like a rabbit in front of a car's headlights. His gaze flickered to Melody, who was looking at us as if we were ghosts who'd shown up at her flawless party. "I don't know what you mean," he mumbled. "I'm sorry. I have an emergency." At 11, Lucille clarified. What a strange time for a business meeting. The atmosphere in the room became unbearably tense. The guests began to look at each other, and some of them started to leave feeling that they had witnessed something very personal. At that moment, the front door swung open and Vera entered the living room. His usually neat hair was disheveled. His tie was askew and his eyes were alert. When he saw Lucille and me, he froze for a moment. "Lucille?" He seemed surprised, but not unpleasantly so. "Dad, what's going on?" Melody was the first to rush over to him. "Vera, darling, some ridiculous incident. Your father accidentally himself in the basement, and for some reason, Lucille thinks I locked him in there. The whole thing is some kind-of misunderstanding." Vera frowned, shifting his gaze from his wife to us. "Dad." He turned to me. "Is it true?" I shook my head. "No, son. Melody lured me into the basement and then locked the door with a key. She said, and I quote, 'Sit tight. The door is jammed. I'll call a handyman after the party.'" Vera looked at his wife with bewilderment. "Melody, is it true?" "Of course not," she exclaimed. He had misunderstood. "I did say the door was jammed, but I didn't lock it. It was an accident." "What about when you said ya wouldn't call the handyman until after the party?" I asked. "Yeah." Melody stammered. "I couldn't interrupt an important meeting." "You were safe. You were fine." "In confinement. I clarified on my birthday." Vera ran a hand through his hair, clearly trying to make sense of the situation. "Look, let's continue this conversation somewhere else," he suggested. "We do have guests." "Yes, we do," Melody said. "Very important clients." "Stuart, you're not leaving." "Are you?" Stuart, almost to the door, reluctantly turned around. "Yeah, I really have to go. It's an emergency call." "Stuart?" We frowned. "Do we know each other?" "Stuart Nash." The man introduced himself, extending his hand. "We met at a real estate conference last year." "I don't remember." Vera shrugged. "But it doesn't matter." "Melody, can we talk in the study?" "The three of us." "Dad, you too, please." "Me too," Lucille said firmly. "I'm coming too." Melody looked like she was cornered. She cast a desperate glance at Stuart, but he studiously avoided looking in her direction. "Darling, what about the guests?" She tried to divert her husband's attention. "They'll have a wonderful time without us for a few minutes," Vera replied. "This is more important." We went into the Denovenmanvu study, a small room that served as Vor's home office. When the door closed, cutting us off from the noise of the party, there was a heavy silence. So Vera sat down at the table, gesturing for us to take seats across from him. "What's going on?" I didn't waste time with accusations or emotions. I just handed him the phone with the video open. "Look at this," I said. "It's from the camera on the back porch. Today's footage." Melody tried to grab the phone, but Lucille stopped her with a firm grip on her wrist. "Don't even think about it," she said quietly. Werner turned on the playback. Melody and Stuart's voices filled the room, discussing their plans for the evening and the future. My son's face grew more somber with each passing second. When the recording ended, he put the phone down on the table and looked at his wife. There was no anger in his gaze, only deep, boundless sadness. "Is it true?" he asked quietly. Melody opened her mouth, but couldn't utter a word. She looked like someone who'd fallen from a great height and realized there was nothing to hold on to. "Werner, I can explain everything," she finally squeezed out. "It's not what you think." "What should I think?" He spread his hands. "You're kissing another man, planning to meet him while I'm at work, saying I won't notice anything because I'm too busy. What exactly did I misunderstand? It was a moment of weakness, she mumbled. Stuart doesn't mean anything, Tome. It's just the business relationship had gone too far. I was going to end midnight at 11 o'clock. Vera clarified with a bitter chuckle. At your usual place. Melody covered her face with her hands. I didn't mean for this to happen. I think that's exactly what you wanted, I interjected. And it wasn't the only thing you were hiding. I opened the folder on my phone with the notes and screenshots I'd collected over the last few months. Here are the messages from Lucille that you deleted from my phone. I showed screenshots of the notifications I'd managed to save. Here are the records of the calls you forgot to give me. And here's a list of my medications with the actual prices far below the ones you'd shown Vera. Melody turned even paler. If that was even possible, how? How did you know? I wasn't always an old man who mumbles to himself and stares out the window, I answered. For 35 years, I've been monitoring the water quality in this city. Observing and documenting is part of my profession. Vera looked through the materials, and with each new page, his face grew more shocked. Did you do all this? He asked, looking at his wife. Intentionally isolated Dad from Lucille. Lied about the cost of his medication. I was trying to protect our family. Melody suddenly exploded. You think it's easy living with an old man under the same roof, keeping track of his medications, listening to his complaints, adjusting your life to his needs. And Lucille just made it harder with her calls and texts. She was always criticizing me, always unhappy with the way I took care of your father. That's not true, Lucille said quietly. I just wanted to be part of his life. Part of your life, Vera. But every time I called, she said you were busy or that Daddy was asleep. And when I sent messages, there were no replies. Vera shook his head as if trying to shake off an obsession. And you were planning to send Dad to a nursing home without discussing it with me. It would have been better for everyone, Melody insisted. He'd get professional care, and we could finally live our lives. You said yourself you were tired of being torn between work and taking care of him. I never said I was tired of taking care of him. Vera clenched his fists. I said I was tired of working all the time and I would never ever agree to send him to some cheap place. As you put it in that post, Melody suddenly changed tactics. Her face contorted with rage. This is a conspiracy, isn't it? You're all conspiring against me. She pointed a trembling finger at me. He always hated me, always looking down on me, criticizing me, making remarks. And now he's decided to destroy our family. You destroyed our family, Wiener said quietly. With your lies, your cheating, your manipulation. Are you choosing him over me? Melody almost shouted. Your grouchy old father.